So I'm Rob. I'm the data analyst for the City of Lansing. I'm from Davison, Michigan. I went to Michigan State, got a degree in statistics, and in my spare time, I like to ski, golf, and travel.
So, my name is Collin Boyce. I am the CIO for the City of Lansing, and the data analytics journey for the City of Lansing came from me. Trinidad and Tobago, I'm the husband of one wife, and I have two high-energy boys, Elisha and Joshua Boyce. So I've worked in New York City, so the Silicon Alley, and theBout.com, theglobe.com, I worked for them, and now I worked for Morehouse School of Medicine, Ryla Teleservices, MERS of Michigan. Some of you guys may be familiar with MERS, the pension fund. Emergent Biosolution, that was kind of a unique experience, only manufacturing the anthrax vaccine. And now Great Lakes Comlink, and now the City of Lansing. Anyone here in government? I know there's one government person. So I see a couple government hands. This stuff that we're talking about will be somewhat germane. It's very government-centric because it's about government. Anyone here now in their early stages of analytics? So this will be really helpful for you guys, and we're going to kind of tell you what our journey was and where we think sort of the finish line is, where we feel like we'll be far on into this project. And if you could give me next slide, because the clicker's not working. So introduction, we're going to talk about what our overall goals was inside of the city, what our approach was, what our architecture was, what data sources we're using, and how we're using use cases inside of the city. So our goal was cities are pregnant with tons of data, right? So everything from tax data to police data to EMS data to fire data to code enforcement data, it all exists inside of your city, right? And it's the reason why hackers are now focusing their attention on the government sector. And so what we wanted to do was we did a crawl, walk, run approach first, right? Because getting the government entities to change how they look at data is phenomenally hard. So what we figured was there's things that government entities want to measure. So almost our mayor at that point in time was Verge Bonero. He used to create this PDF thing that was called Lansing Stat. And what we did was we tapped into that and we said, hey, look, we want to generate basic dashboards. And that was before Rob, so that was BR. And who we used to do that was we partnered with Qlik and WIT, and they did a lot of work for us in the background. So after we got some department dashboards going in place and we generated some excitement, we moved into finding synergies, and then eventually we want to move into predictive. So we want to make data-driven decisions, right? Every government entity says data-driven decisions, but we don't really make data-driven decisions. So we're pushing our universe to be able to do that. Next slide. So, smart cities. Everyone is talking about smart cities, right? And everyone thinks smart city is about technology. And technology is a small component of it. But truly a smart city is about taking your data from all of your data sources and using that to make decisions, right? When you speak to Cisco, they're going to say smart cities is about buying your devices or smart traffic lights. It's such a small percentage of it. Data is really how you become smart. And so we're trying to make the City of Lansing a smart city. So you have green initiatives, governance, public safety, smart buildings. So this is something we're actually working on where we're pulling in all of the bills, electric bills for the city and pushing them into an analytics platform and then figuring out what are the top consumers and how to become more energy efficient as far as the city's concerned. Utilities, well, we don't have our own utility branch. We use BWL. Transportation, they're interested in partnering with us, so that's kind of a future partnership. Education, and then healthcare. So everything on the right side is pretty much outside of the four walls in the city. Everything on the left side is what we can do today, and the numbers are just arbitrary, so one doesn't mean we're starting there, it just means it's one of the components. Next slide, please. So typically, if you're doing some kind of project, right, you have this approach, right, where you identify needs. I'm sure you guys are doing that. You think about governance policies, then you explore, you cast vision, you cast a vision, and then you prioritize your deployment. That didn't work in the city. It would never work in our organization because from an analytics perspective, we couldn't get that to work. Next slide. What we did was we socialized and we cast a vision with the executive leadership and in the department meetings. And then the next thing that we did was we started to build dashboards. We had access to their data, we knew what was insensitive, and we figured out what made sense. Matter of fact, Vince McCoy, who's actually in the back, hey Vince. Vince sat down with us and we were looking at stuff and we asked departments for metrics and KPIs, and I think 2 departments responded, but everyone else had no idea where to begin. So what we started was, we started to analyze the data for them and gave them a dartboard so they could throw stuff at it, and then we got the what if we did this. And then finally, we ran into the discovering of identifying metrics and KPIs, and the new one that we're doing is KRIs. So if anyone is interested in risk, KRIs are how you identify risk and you measure risk throughout the environment. Next slide, please. Please.
Okay. First, we started to think about how do we do this? Do we take initiative from each department? Do we plan as a collective whole? So ideally, you had the council and mayor's office and leadership create the directives and how we're going to structure this in a manner that keeps it, within a governance policy that isn't exposing too much. And then we moved on to pushing it out into the city to be used and create those models for the users to look at, to interpret, to pass along to theirs, and then eventually it cycles back to improving and getting better. And then basically the end step was making sure we're projecting the right information, because there is a lot of disparity between the systems, which we are working on fixing, but that was the final step in our process, is making sure that what we're reporting is right, are we reporting it right, and how do we get better at reporting it?
Next slide. Actually, if you guys could bring me your clicker, if that's going to work better than mine, that way I can avoid saying next slide. So governance, right? So government is always about governance, right? And the problem with governance is by the time you finish writing strong governance policies, you lose momentum because people are getting involved with that. So how we approached it was we used Qlik, and we gave people access to security based on their roles. So data that they already have access to, we visualized that and we gave them access to it. We just gave them the ability to see it visually. The other thing that we thought was really important as we started to build the visualization on the end user data was, as we started to do it, people came out of the woodworks. So who was it? We were working in parking, right? Yes. And, yeah, we were working in parking, and we had a question because we're tapping into the database. And we said, hey, how do you know what spots are used and are underused, and a bunch of stuff. We're asking a bunch of questions, and it was like, hey, Susan is working on a report that she does on a monthly basis where she's doing that all the time. And by asking questions, we were able to find efficiencies, and finding those efficiencies, we then had partners that were unexpected inside of the city. So we also wanted to make sure that we don't share data that we're not allowed to share. So you have HIPAA data, CJIS. Anyone familiar with CJIS? Criminal justice information. Yeah, the government folks will be. So if you got pulled over by the cops, you have to go through CJIS certification. We can't just share that. PCI type data, credit card information, tax information, because it's PII. We have to be careful that we're not sharing that stuff outside of the department. And how we tackled that was the first time in my life that I said, you know what I need? I need some attorneys. And we got the attorneys in the room, and the attorneys now help us manage that data. And then we're adjusting access to based on groups and allowing them to work through it. Quick question, big green button means go, yes. So the business workflow. I was talking to someone about this first, right? We decided that we wanted to break up into 2 teams, but there's 3 sets of data. So there's a technical team, and the technical team is departments. And so what we did was we started off first with meeting with one-on-one with departments, understanding their data, but then we pulled together multiple departments inside of the room and we're now pulling in synergy between their data. So, for example, and I know this is going to come up again later, police pulls over Rob Gerth because he's a bad guy. Look at him, right? But Rob also happens to be diabetic. And the ambulance is picking up Rob too because he has a diabetic attack. We can't share with police that Rob is a diabetic, but we can share that this is also an address affiliated with him. So if Rob, the bad guy, is wanted by the police, they now know there's another place that they can find him. And so we were able to find some synergies with that, and dashboard creation, and we're going to touch on some of this stuff later on. Then there's a neighborhood team, and the neighborhood team is really the mayor's office and anyone who's facing the outside. And their job is to drive businesses into the city, as well as increase citizens' satisfaction, or the neighborhood satisfaction and quality of life for the citizens. So what they're doing is taking what the technical team comes up with, distilling the data down so you're not giving too much details, and they're making data-driven decisions with that. And then finally, open data. Every city is dealing with open data. We're in the early stages of open data, but eventually everything that comes from step 1, step 2, step 3 will become an open data, and we have 2 approaches towards open data, which we're going to touch on. You guys okay out there? I know it's not exciting stuff, right? You want to talk about democratization? That.
Sure. So the goal is to build this data set that is easy for everyone to understand and applies to a collective whole, rather than to the point where only certain departments can utilize it and certain departments can benefit from it. So creating that uniform data set allows each department to benefit not only off of their data, but ingest the other departments and let that reflect how they make decisions. And then it's also going to be a point where we can provide information that businesses or citizens of the city would like to have that doesn't put us in a bind with revealing sensitive information that is pretty much illegal to give out. So,
perfect. So, our enterprise architecture. On the left-hand side, you have multiple line of business applications. And certainly, we have more than this, and we're going to show you some of the stuff that we have in place. But you have multiple line of business applications, and then you have TimeXtender. We have Joseph in the front, who is our rep through TimeXtender, and what TimeXtender does is it automates the data warehouse creation. So you can use scripts, and it pulls in from multiple places, and it does the ETL, and then creates a data warehouse that you're able to hit, which we found to be extremely helpful. We started off, it's funny, because when we started off, we had a model where we said, hey, we don't want anything that in the data warehouse unless it's remote, it's across the cloud. And now everything goes into TimeXtender. Out of TimeXtender, you have the open data piece where Qlik partnered with us and they gave us a bunch of open data licenses. They were phenomenal to deal with. And then Qlik is what predominantly we use for the ingestion of our data up here. And there's people who are able to mine the data out of Qlik. What we found was, and I know things have changed a little bit, there's new things that are coming in Qlik. We are now using also SSRS. Part of the usage case behind this, and we'll touch on this, is police officers go to a house, they get a call from the CAD, which is the dispatch for the police officers. And they need to make a decision whether they go in with a long gun or a short gun, or I'm gonna say a long firearm, or they do use their sidearm. And they search on the person they're coming to figure out if this is a violent offender or not. And doing that with Qlik, when we tried to do it, it was kind of cumbersome to be able to do in the cards, but SSRS, so quick text search, we're able to pull up the pictures of the individuals super quick. And all of this is, once again, going back into the TimeXtender ecosystem. And one day, I'm gonna use the right one. So where we wanna go, and this is probably the gaps, we wanna do premium open data. So for government entities, what's happening is, as you start to do open data, businesses are being formed ingesting your data. And by them ingesting your data, they're now making money off of it. So what we figured we want to do is have a premium open data thing where they can now pull the data that they would normally pull from the open data platform, but now closer to real time. And it's subscription-based, so it helps fund the model that we have. Once again, we still have TimeXtender. We're looking to plug in data cleansing and some predictive components because we're moving down the paradigm. Anything you want to add, Rob?
No, not on that.
You could talk about this.
No, take it away.
All right. So TimeXtender, once again, you have TimeXtender is, its big schlick is it can pull in from multiple data sources. It pulls in, and you now have all of this stuff happening where the data warehouse is created, and there's an integration with Qlik where it can push the data into Qlik in multiple ways. There's some stuff that we discovered along the way, so we're pioneering with a lot of security. So City of Lansing, extremely secure, and some of our tightness with security has inhibited some of this workflow, but the one thing we love is that dealing with their team, they've never left us the entire way. If we have a question, they answer it. They're working with us in order to get it done. And I'm not a salesman for TimeXtender, but they do make a good product. So they have 100 connections. They can auto-generate code and auto-generate Qlik apps. And as I said, big partnership with us. And the installation of TimeXtender was done in conjunction with WIT and TimeXtender. So great partnership there. I'm going to keep bouncing through. So here's our current data sources, right? We have police, fire, city asset management system, which we use CityWorks, emergency medical services, human resource data, map data, vehicle location data, and 911 dispatch. And through that, we're able to find some real powerful stuff that help us solve some of the issues. Other things that we're tying in is insurance claims, weather stuff, public data from the county, prescriptions by doctors, Center for Disease Control and Transportation statistics. We throw everything in it, and whether we need it or not, it's just a question of, adding it or removing it. It takes a couple seconds. Rob, I think this is all you.
Okay. So we're using geoanalytics a lot to kind of incorporate some of our maps through ArcGIS into our Qlik layers so that we can see some of these things. So the multicolored layer is the current neighborhood boundaries within the city. And then the heat map, which is the faded color with red, green, blue, that shows the concentration of incidents happening across the city from the culmination of all the data sources. And then as you filter down within Qlik, that map will change and show the redistribution based off of what you're looking at with year filters, address filters, all sorts of different combination things. And then on the right, you just see an example of the KPI we're in charts we're using to show that, look, this is what has happened since your data source started, and this is where we're at this year. Are we making progress? Are things working? Do we need to reassess? And then just tracking over time to see how we're doing.
So I'm going to jump in, and Rob, I'm going to embarrass you for 1 second. So everyone is aware, when the City of Lansing started their journey, we were looking for a data person. Rob came straight out of college. He had no experience with data analytics. Matter of fact, true story, he interviewed with me and the application manager, and in the middle of the interview, we're asking him questions. And I'm like, yeah, it's done. We're just going to be beating up on this kid. I ended the interview. And I said, hey, look, you come here, we're going to turn you into a data scientist. He came in 2 months, and we used Udemy. I know Qlik, if they're in the room, they're not going to like that. We used Udemy because they have some Qlik courses. And we used SQL courses on it and SSRS courses. And for 2 months, that's all he did. And all of the stuff he's doing now is based on 2 months of training, and he's driving it home. So it was important for us that it was easy, because the one thing that happens in the government world is we don't pay like the private sector. and getting them fresh out of college and making it easy and adding value really quickly was a way to ramp up. And so he's been amazing. He's blushing over there, but he's been
Thank you.
amazing. And if you think he's amazing now, get him to sing for you later on. So SQL reporting services. We added this into the mixture. We kind of talked about that. So you take an address or a person and you stick it inside of the system, and you can get all of the case numbers. We block them out to protect the innocent. You can get the address. You can get the date of the event. And it's really cool for these quick ad hoc searches. I spoke to the guy in Qlik outside. He said, hey, they got something that's on the horizon that's going to address this problem. But this was our approach to it. And it took us about a month or so to build this platform and integrate the data sources. So super easy to do.
Yeah, so back to the neighborhoods group. So there's a monthly group, or no, once a month group that meets to discuss neighborhood concerns, initiatives they're attempting to do, and just the overall status of our neighborhoods. Are we putting effort forward? And some of the things that they like to track are, do these properties have consistencies? So across all the systems, you can link, you can get your address from all the systems. You can get the owner of the property from our code enforcement systems. And you can see that, this top company has 91,000 violations throughout the course of the data set. And then you can start to see how things have happened over time, as if these bad properties continue to get worse, or if some sort of initiative has attempted to fix that or even corrected the problems that are existing.
So if you start looking at the executive level, what they wanted to see was, where are we spending most of our tax dollars going to? So that person, it's not 91,000 in a year. That was probably, since the property has been in ownership.
2002 is the earliest.
Right, so
year,
2002,
so,
yeah. So now the city is able, within 30 seconds, they can click and zoom in 2018, 2017, 2019, and see what are the top properties that's causing problems inside of the city. And we could see now, if police is visiting someone, code enforcement, fire, and EMS, we're now seeing a heat map of what's taking place. And now we can figure out, are we giving leniency? If we're selling property and we're auctioning it off, do we need to make procedural changes in how we approach that stuff? So totally helpful as far as the city, and it gives, great feedback. Here's a heat map that was generated. So once again, the heat map concept, the red items are all of the firehouses, and the green items, we threw on all of the marijuana locations. And the marijuana locations, we didn't know where they were all at, so we looked at weed maps, and we downloaded all of them, and we put the visualization. And if you could see, the heat map of all of the city events are far away from that, but as the year progresses, and by the way, we just recorded this, so the tool did this on its own, you could start to see the events gravitate towards that. So marijuana locations apparently attract crime, and for those who watch South Park, you know who Towelie is. Apparently there's a problem with getting high. So how do we see this working? The City of Lansing is using analytics, and as we progress up the left quadrant, there's business value, right? We want to really add that value to the business, and then as sophistication, we want to move from informational to helping the city optimize operations. So, and this is going to be across the board in anyone doing analytics, right? You start off and it's descriptive, right? You're looking at what happened in the past and it's dashboards. This is what took place. And then you start with why it happened. So you start to do some statistical analysis, and what we started to do was talking about, as properties and owners that we interact with, kind of ranking them and understanding what's taking place with them. So you're kind of still diagnostic, but you're still in the hindsight mode. One step further, we want to become predictive in what we do. So, we're talking to the city of Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor, if you look at the city of Lansing, there's Ann Arbor surrounds us, Detroit, Battle Creek. If they pull over someone with marijuana or heroin, we want to be able to see what's happening in their world because we may be able to predict how it impacts us if we see a normal trend. Makes perfect sense, right? And so we're now doing correlations and we have perceptions associated with that. So when is it going to happen? What's going to happen? One of the other ones that we're working on is a comprehensive heroin map, where we're taking, pause for this in a second. Fire has a line of business application, and they deal with heroin. They drive around with Narcan. EMS deals with heroin overdoses. Police deal with heroin overdoses. And if you want to see what's happening with heroin overdoses inside of a city, you're pulling it from 3 records management systems, absorbing it, and then inevitably someone says, well, what happened at this hour? And then you have to start all over again. By the approach we're taking, we're now consolidating into one single screen, and you click a button and you can easily adjust, go back and forth. So we're predicting it, and now we're able to see it. Finally, where we want to get to is prescriptive. Prescriptive analytics is kind of the highest level of maturity when you're dealing with analytics. The idea is not only foresight, but what are the levers that you can pull to influence the situation? I'm going to bounce back. Wrong clicker. I'm going to bounce back to this. And as you look, we can clearly see the marijuana locations have a lot of code enforcement, police, fire events taking place. Do you see that? What else do you see? Look at the top of the map. The stuff that's in the northern part of town where it's not a major, it's not a dense populated area, there's almost no impact there. And the further you go out, the less impact it has. So now we can change how we zone. And so understanding what the levers that you can pull and simulating that in the platform, true power for us from the perspective of governance inside of a city. Does that make sense? Oh, by the way, true story. Figuring this out, we had all this data in it, and I woke up one morning, I'm like, I wonder how marijuana affects what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I came in with Rob, and I beat up on him to do that. So how do we influence it? So ultimately, where we want to go to is a continuous service improvement. So we have a strategy inside of the city, and we want to figure out what detracts from that strategy. We want to show that we have a commitment to the people, our citizens, in making things better. We have a process now, as we discovered stuff, to be able to ingest it and make changes throughout the organization in partnership, we're a strong mayor, with our city council. And then we want to measure performance, so we're developing KPIs and metrics across the board. And we're open to questions. Anyone has any questions? As I said, this was our journey. And certainly there may be things that you will ask, and we will be learning from you as you start to ask questions as well. Please. I could walk it over. I beat you.
You have 2 mics. You keep yours so you can answer easily.
Well, Rob is singing.
I am right here.
Please.
Do you feed the Michigan State Police with any of your data?
So we are an SRMS, and so all of the data is in the Michigan State Police because they use information builders out in Diamonddale to do some of their stuff. So yes.
Thank you.
And we're working with, are you familiar with the Michigan State Police folks? Mm-hmm. So we're working with Bob Phelps. Bob Phelps and I talk probably once a week. Anyone else? Any questions? I know it's very government-centric. Yes.
Question, I guess, you said like you're a CFO and you're from finance.
Oh, I'm a CIO.
Oh, sorry, CIO. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, then it's not a question for me. I want you to bring in like a data analytics into the audit shop. Like, I know that you have operationalized the data analytics,
Mm-hmm.
but like from the audit perspective, what, like I'm from the audit shop, we are trying to bring the predictive analytics and the data analytics within the audit shop so that we can perform the data analytics and come up with controls improvements and recommend efficiencies and recommend exceptions to the city management. We don't want to work from the operations perspective because there's a conflict of interest and independence, but we want to work from the audit perspective.
So-
anything?
Yeah,
into that?
so we are actually working with the city auditor, and so one of the things that we like about doing this is that we put together all of these dashboards. And so think of it as a buffet. And we bring in the city auditor, and he's looking at the buffet, providing it doesn't violate CGIS or HIPAA or whatever, and he's picking out of the buffet what he needs. And then the synergies that he's looking for, we're also showing him the synergies across communications. So yes, we are working with the auditors, but we're working closely. We're not dictating, we're a partner. Please.
So you were showing the slide on how the different functions,
Yes.
can you go to that for a second, please, with the right clicker?
I still like the tower one.
Whatever makes you happy. Okay, so you just passed it one more. Okay. No, back, yeah, no,
Hold on, I think the functions one is.
you were there before.
Was I?
Yeah,
Talk
go,
about the data sources.
data sources.
The data source, okay, because there was three functional, I thought that's what you were talking about.
I'm sorry. Okay. Do you get into any across, so for the example, so I work for utility, so what we do is we forecast a number of storms, weather events. So that affects fire, that affects police, that affects emergency, medical. Do you get into that type of stuff of prognosticating how many severe weather events you're going to have and how it affects the cross-functional departments, or whatever you call them?
So yes, we're starting a project. I'm going to just project my voice. Can you hear me in the back? So we're working with the Emergency Operations Center to build a dashboard to do just that. So we're starting a project right now to do that with EOC. So looking at storms and how it affects the cross section, and they have needs for maps as well. So for example, property damage when a storm takes place, and monitoring repairs and tracking that, we will be doing that.
So if you want an easy way to get it started, you can go back 4 years, the number of storms that you had.
Got it.
Cross-reference it to fires. You'll find that it's a fairly smooth distribution.
Is it?
And then you could use it to prognosticate by saying, I'm going to have so many storms, which will affect so many fires, and just simple regression. Don't make it linear, you'll get yourself in trouble. And then you'll be able to talk about each month what the event is, and then make adjustments.
He gave you a new project. Thank him.
Well, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. I give him work all the time. Anyone else? Thank you.
Got one more right here.
Do you ask, so you're doing one more.
Oh, no.
So is someone else? I can-
No, go ahead, please.
So you're doing a lot of current type reporting. Do you get into the question of things changing? So for example, you can have a street with a lot of businesses that's going to affect traffic patterns, that's going to affect police and fire because of being able to get from point A to point B, that's going to affect revenue. So do you get into that type of stuff?
We're getting into that now. So we're looking for that predictive engine and mapping the trends. And so within the next, we are actually in conversation with a couple predictive people to help us on that journey.
So you might take another note. You could run a Monte Carlo, run it 1,000 iterations, and it'll come up, or you can use triangulate to be able to determine, what, that would be an easier way than Monte Carlo.
Next question.
Right back here.
Unless he has another one. This guy is he's on fire.
Do we have time for one more? So you mentioned a little bit about a new initiative for a premium open data platform that the city is thinking about launching. Can you talk a little bit about what type of demand that you're seeing from the public, or what type of data products you're trying to launch on this type of platform?
So I know in the Lansing market, we haven't gotten a ton of requests at the moment. What we are seeing, though, is if you look across, there is people who are purposely and intentionally going after government data, and they're building products, and they're charging us for it, and then using it to fund other stuff in the background. And so we're looking at charging them to get our data as opposed to giving to them and paying them. It just seems like a reverse model. But we've had 3 or 4 companies ask us to, they're going to help us with neighborhood development and that type of stuff, really specialized niche type of things. And then we'll pay them for it, and then they use the data to make money somewhere else. Yeah, so there is a demand. Did we talk about the integration with Esri? So there's integration with Esri as well with the maps, and I know there's demand for our maps as well. So it would help with that. Any other questions? You guys want to hear Rob sing now?
Sorry, voice is gone.
Next time. Thank you guys for coming.